This is Contractor Sense with Ruth King.
Welcome to Contractor Sense. Here you discover ideas, tactics, news, and information that matters to your contracting business and you. I'm your host, Ruth King. This episode is sponsored by Financially Fit Business. Get the business tool that turns your financial statements into impactful graphs that help you see what your business trends are to make sure they are headed in the right direction. Go to www.financiallyfit.business and get started today. Thank you for joining us. Here is how we will help your business and you. Is a 10% net profit good? Well, maybe and maybe not. Here's why. Two owners were comparing notes, all right? Each was bragging that they earned a 10% net profit that year. When I looked at behind the percentages, one owner had a net profit per hour of $10 an hour. The other had a net profit per hour of $50 per hour. Who is kidding whom? I mean, do you want $10 an hour or do you want $50 an hour? The reality is that sales matter. Profits matter most. One of my favorite lines has always been, volume is vanity and profits are sanity. If you don't know what your company is earning for each hour that you produce products and services, then you're clueless about profitability, the thing that matters most to sustaining your business for the long term. Let's dive into why this is really, really important. But before we do, the thing is that my thing is that percentages don't matter. And this is a perfect example of why, a percentage of net profit doesn't matter. Would you prefer to be the contractor who had the 10%, or would you prefer the contractor who had the $50 an hour rather than the $10 an hour? I mean, the guy who was doing $50 an hour net profit was doing a lot better than the guy who was doing 10, yet both of them had a 10% net. So it's not the percentage, it's actually the dollars behind the percentages that matter. All right. So the reason this is so important is when you ask, and I ask contractors this all the time, how do you generate revenue? And the answer I always get is sales, all right, or, service or install or replacement or projects or maintenance or something like that. I said, yeah, that's true, but dive deeper, all right? How do you really generate revenue? In our industry, it's by billable hours, all right? Think about it this way. If you have a tech out there and he doesn't bill a client, you have no revenue. But he puts on his timesheet that he worked 40 hours a week or 40 hours for that week. But you can only bill for maybe 20 hours of that week. That's not a good ratio. So it's not just the sale, it's the billable hours behind the sale. So if we think about it, what we have is perishable. If a technician or a field employee works 8 hours today but only bills 6 hours of them, for example, we can't save the other 2 hours until the next day. I mean, they're gone. We have to start the next day with 8 hours. Okay, in the summertime or on busier times, it might be 9 or 10 hours that they work, but they'll burn out too. So the key is to figure out, number one, how do you maximize billable hours? And number two is you have to add this little word on top of that called profitably, right? Because you can maximize billable hours and if you're losing $1 for every billable hour, guess what? More billable hours means more loss. So take a really good look at what your field employees are doing. Are they billable most of the time? Your install or your replacement teams, the answer should be yes. Service is a little trickier, but if you charge a service call fee, that time is billable, so most of their days should also be billable. Okay. So once we have our billable hours, we know how many billable hours, we're at the beginning of this year, so we know how many billable hours we had last year. And take your net profit that you had last year, and let's say you had $100,000 in net profit, and you had 2,000 billable hours, so you're at $50 net profit per hour. Is that good or bad? I don't know. That's up to you. For some people, that might be phenomenal, especially if the year before they were at $2 net profit per hour. So there's no answer to net profit per hour, what it should or should not be. But I digress for a second. So let's take the definition of net profit for billable hours. Take your total net operating profit and divide it by your total revenue producing billable hours. You don't include vacations, you don't include holidays, you don't include meeting time, you don't include travel time, you don't include shop time, you don't include time that you pay them to sweep the floor or do what I call February projects because you need to keep food on their table in a slower time of year. It is simply net operating profit divided by total revenue producing billable hours. Okay. So it's always interesting to have contractors calculate this number for the first time. I have done it in so many classes. And, last class I did, the highest net profit per hour was $3.60. And the lowest was less than $1. Why are you working for $3.60? That's nuts. Even fast food restaurants are paying more than that these days. I've seen it like $17 to $20 an hour. Go work in a fast food restaurant. It's a lot less stress, a lot less issues. And is it really worth it to work for $3.60 an hour? I can't answer that question for you. You're the only one who can answer that question. So do the calculation. It's the end of the year. You know what your net profit was for the year. And you can, if you don't know the exact number of billable hours, then what you can do is estimate it from the number of employees that were field employees that you had last year. If the guys in the field were working, most of the time, the maximum number of hours that they're probably going to have billable is somewhere around 1,900 hours. And that's generally for install, simply because they're there all day. They don't travel. They don't do anything other than work. They still have vacation. They still have holidays. They still have meeting times. For techs, it's a little bit less than that, 1,700 hours, maybe 1,600 hours that they can actually bill. But figure it out. You know who your guys are and your ladies are. And assume, 1,900 hours for your install crews and assume, let's say, 17 or 1,800 hours for your service technicians if they're truly billable that much. If it's 50%, then guess what? They get 1,000 hours rather than 1,800 hours. And do the numbers. See how it comes. If you don't like it, then guess what? It's time to make some changes. And I'll talk about some of that after the break. Thanks for listening to Contractor Sense. Imagine you had total freedom. You didn't have to worry about money. You didn't have to be a slave to your business. The words, "I can't," are eliminated from your vocabulary. What if you could do what you want to do, whenever you want to do it? A financially fit business could give you that freedom. How? By knowing what your financial statements are telling you and taking action based on what they say. You can do this in less than 10 minutes a month at an investment of less than taking your family out to dinner once a month. And if your financial statements are a mess, you can get help. Go to www.financiallyfit.business or click on the QR code below to get started today. We're back. Thanks for listening to Contractor Sense. Before the break, we talked about actually making this calculation. Force yourself into making it and see where you are from a net profit per hour perspective. I've had $8, $9, $10 million companies who are earning $4 and $5 net profit per hour. Then they get shocked at how little they're actually earning for how much revenue they're actually generating. It's time to get profitable. It's time for profitability to go up. So I want to talk about 3 of the most frequent questions that I get about calculating net profit per hour. Number 1, which is the most prevalent question, is why should I look at my profits this way? All right. So in the beginning, I gave you the story of 2 contractors, one each was earning, 10% quote unquote net profit. One had been earning $10 an hour and the other was earning $50 net profit per hour. Which one would you rather be? Obviously, I would hope you answered $50 net profit per hour. Well, kudos in the beginning for looking at your bottom line, but don't look at it on a percentage. Look at it on the actual dollars. The top line is important. The gross profit line is important, but the most important line is your bottom line profit. So what are you making each hour that an field employee bills to produce your products and your services? Once you know this, you can start managing your business from the bottom up. You know that in a service department that if a technician bills an hour, you have an idea of how much should be dropping to the bottom line. And once you get that more and more billable hours, then you're going to watch your profitability go up. All right, question number 2. This is the second most popular question that I get, or frequent question I get, is what should my net profit per hour be? Well, that's totally up to you. What are you comfortable with? I really don't care what the quote unquote KPIs are, key performance indicators, with respect to profitability, because they give you a false sense of security. What does a 15% net mean? What does a 20% net mean? Look at it in terms of the number of dollars for every billable hour that you have. If you're only looking at the percentages or a KPI, whatever, for net profit per hour, if you're above that, whatever it is, you're going to relax and go, okay, I don't have to worry about this anymore. And you may not pay attention to your bottom line as you should. Interesting story. I started working with a client again because he had sent me an email literally January 2nd and said, can we get back together? And he said, quite frankly, I had a phenomenal 2004 and I didn't think I needed you anymore, because he stopped paying attention. And then 2025 was not a good year because he wasn't paying attention. And he realized it doesn't matter whether it's a good time or a bad time. You still have to pay attention to the numbers. And reporting to somebody on the outside always makes you get your numbers there. But the key is the trend. Is your net profit per hour increasing? Even if you're below whatever the KPI is for what you want it to be, as long as it's increasing, you're headed in the right direction. Okay. Now, I always get asked these questions as part of this. What's like the national average? All right. And I always answer it this way. For service, it's around $75 net profit per hour, but that is the average. It's higher in places like Connecticut and New York and California and Seattle and stuff like that, because their cost of living is higher and they have to generate more profit to be able to keep their guys growing and pay higher salaries and stuff like that. In lesser economic areas, it's not even $75 net profit per hour. So choose what you want it to be. The best thing to do is to look at what your service revenues were last year, divided by the number of billable hours, your service profits were last year, and divided by the number of hours. And that's what your net profit per hour was for service last year. You don't like it? Change it. And the other thing that I look at is a story that I'm going to tell you. So one of my clients is commercial only, plumbing and HVAC. And their 2 new construction crews finished the job the end of fall of one year, and they didn't have anything major on the books until spring the following year. So what do you do with the crews? You lay them off? Guess what? They got other jobs because they're good crews. Or you suffer through the entire, 6 months of the slower season until the stuff that's on the books starts, which is also not a really good idea. So believe it or not, this public works job came up, and it started late fall, ended spring. Perfect. Filled the calendar. Okay, what was the purpose of this job? This purpose of the job was to keep the guys productively busy through the through the winter and early spring. All right, so we knew the number of hours that it should take. We knew the material costs. We know their overhead costs per hour. The thing that we didn't know was what net profit per hour we should bid this job at. And we went back and forth about it. And then remembering that the goal of the job is to break even through the winter so that the department doesn't lose, their butt. And so we bid it at $5 net profit per hour, which is break even in my book. So they got the job and everybody went, "What? You can't do it for that." And I told him to keep his mouth shut about how we did it. And so they did the job. They told them how many hours they had. They told them, and they did their normal tracking for the jobs to make sure that they did the work in the time allotted to do the jobs. And yes, the job came in, and when job costed the job, it came in about $6 net profit per hour. Okay. So it did its job. Now, the reason I tell you that story is because net profit per hour can vary depending upon time of year, season, economic conditions, and things along those lines. If you're in a situation where you absolutely have to have the work, you know how low you can go with a net profit per hour of $5 net profit per hour. And in some cases, you may be, bidding boilers and chillers and things like that, and you can be, a whole lot more than that, $500 to $1,000 net profit per hour. It kind of depends. Depends upon the type of work you're doing and those types of things. But what working by and bidding by net profit per hour is, exactly what your bottom line should be, and you know how low you can go. And sometimes you can go really, really, really high at the same time. Okay. The last question that I get occasionally is, what hours should I include in this calculation? So let me answer that one also. The only hours that you should include are your billable or revenue producing hours. You may pay your field employees for 2,080 hours a year. You may pay them on production pay, but you don't want vacation hours. You don't want holiday hours. You don't want sick time, meeting time, training time, anything that you can't bill a client for. If you're on production pay, and some of you are for install and replacements, then assuming, if it's an 8-hour day, doesn't matter what you're paying them, assuming that it's 16 hours for a crew of 2. So the point is to start thinking about bottom line rather than gross profit line or sales. Managing by net profit per hour will truly help you generate profitable sales. So I challenge you. Calculate your company's net profit per hour. It's a great time of year to do it. Year's just started. And if you're happy with it, great. If you're not happy with it, it's time to figure out what you're going to do to make it come up for 2026 and beyond. I'm doing a class called Building Profit and Wealth where I go into this in a great amount of details. If you want the information about class, just let me know and send me an email or give us a call, and I will send you the information and hopefully see you in class. So thank you for joining us. Choose one thing that you discovered and implement it in your business. These ideas, tactics, and strategies help you make more money, have more free time, and give back. If you like today's program, spread the word. Please review this podcast on any device you're listening to it on. Help a fellow contractor make more money too. For comments or questions, call me at 770-729-0258 or email Ruth King at hvacchannel.tv. Thanks for listening. Have a great and profitable day.